What's up guys, Evan Jarvis here. In today's video, you are going to learn why working on your pre-flop game is going to set you up for success with your post-flop game, why you don't need to know any sick plays to show some serious profit, and how you can use simple, basic plays to take control and run the action. Most importantly, you're going to learn how to drop the training wheels of starting range charts and really get in tune with what's important at the poker table and what you should be paying attention to if you want to maximize your earn on every single hand. Let's get stacking.
Hey everybody, this is Alexander Fitzgerald or Assassinato doing another one of my free webinars. Today's webinar is going to be called The 5 Preflop Plays You Need to Succeed. Where are you going wrong? Get this through your head. Every time you make a lazy preflop call, you ruin your results. Every time you make a poor raise that makes no sense, you are setting up your tournament's death. Every time you flat a 3-bet out of position for no reason, you're consenting to a variance bomb. Let's get rid of these mistakes in your game today. Brief introduction. This has been in a couple of webinars, so I'm going to just go really quickly through it just in case this is your first one of mine seeing it. My name is Alexander Fitzgerald. I turned pro in 2006 when I was 18 years old. I haven't had a quote real job since. I have WPT and EBT final tables along with WCOOP and Scoop wins. I've been lucky in my career. I wouldn't say I blew things out of the water, but I've been lucky enough to keep the lights on and keep going for 12 years. More importantly, I've taught more private poker lessons than anyone on earth. Of course, I'm just guessing on that bullet point, but I'm fairly sure it's correct. I've been coaching privately since 2007. I think it's a good idea for any professional to have other streams of income just due to the unpredictable nature of poker. I found out early on that I actually really enjoyed coaching, so I stuck with that. If you want to learn something, teach it. Those were the words of the brilliant Mr. Feynman. I found the more I taught, the better I got at Hold'em, so I really do just love it. I really do love the game of No Limit Hold'em. I really love big final tables. I love the pressure of that. And the more you teach, the more comfortable you get. So I've always really had an attraction to that. Of my thousands of students, I had the privilege of working with 3 #1 Pocket Fivers, a Player of the Year, and several others. Surprisingly, however, you know who teaches you the most. It's the German housewives, the oil field workers, and the music professors. Getting people from other industries to question your work is amazing because they'll ask anything. There are no wrong questions. They have no preconceived notion curtailing their creativity. Anyway, while I love that, there were some things I noticed routinely while I was teaching. My paranoia with the pre-flop game. I was commissioned to do a project by my students called Master the Flop. People wanted to know all my post-flop tricks to make real money. When I made the videos, people were shocked at how long I spent on the pre-flop game. But there is no post-flop game without proper pre-flop strategy. Think of chess. Could you imagine if someone was discussing middle game strategy in chess but never taught you opening strategy? There's a lot of that in poker training these days. These guys talk down to you. They want to show you all their sick post-flop plays. There's a lot of careful editing around that, and it's not going to set you up for success. So, guys, the best way I can put this, and I'm not a chess aficionado, but I really find the game interesting in that it's a strategy game that's been around for thousands of years, that people have played competitively and have played for money. So there's a lot to learn from it because obviously they've developed quite a few advancements in strategic thinking over these millennia. And one of the things I always think about with poker is if the whole world started playing chess for money and most people didn't know much of anything, I think the way we would learn if we were going to play chess for money is have a really solid opening game strategy, get us in position to control the middle of the board, and then have solid fundamentals and just beat regular competition with that day in and day out. Most of what I teach in poker is that. It's solid fundamentals. I believe my fundamentals are different than other people, which is why I've been lucky enough to do as well as I have with coaching. But you what I worry about with a lot of other coaching, and my coaching at the beginning was when you're teaching at the beginning, there's this instinct to want to sound like the smartest guy in the room. I was certainly guilty of this when I was younger as well. So you try to show off all your flashy big bluffs, all your flashy river bluffs and things like that. The problem with that being, there is a lot of careful editing around that. There's a lot of times that goes wrong. And if you really want someone to do well in middle stakes and low stakes, what would be much better is to teach them how to control the board in this analogy, how to control the game in No Limit Hold'em. Building blocks for success. You're not going to win awards for excitement by discussing pre-flop strategy. People want to see sick river jams, but how many opens do you do every session versus how many river bluffs? It's literally 200 to 1. It's like going to a park and seeing a kid practicing a chocolate thunder dunk all day as opposed to dribbling, passing, and free throws. Let's start with a basic one. This is literally a situation all of you have seen thousands of times. Those of you who are familiar with my work will recognize this situation, but I bet the rest of you won't. This is the most basic fundamental in No Limit Hold'em, and yet no one wants to discuss it. I'm not going to shut up about it until people really get talking about it. Again, I'm done with chocolate thunder dunks. I want to see if you can pass the ball without turning it over. You've been in this situation maybe tens of thousands of times in your life. Now, I want to know what you do here. All right, guys, if you've never taken a lesson with me before, be warned. I ask a ton of questions. That's not for my health. Research shows if you answer questions, you will remember 4 times as much. So write down your answers, pay attention. That's the way you can get the most bang for your buck and get you guys winning. For those of you who've taken a lesson with me before, this is going to be a little bit more review, but test yourself because this is the thing that comes up all the time. And I still see a lot of people flub this. And I threw a variant in this one. Let's see how you do on it, just to keep things fun. So what's your move here? You have 7-10 of spades in the hijack. Would you like to fold, call, or raise? Give you about 20 seconds to think about that. All right, time is up. Now here's the variant. If you do open, how often do you open? 20% of the time, 40%, 60%, 80%, 100%? Okay, time is up. On to the next slide. Why do you open or not open there? Write something down. If you have nothing to write, ask how many times a session you're in this spot. I'm going to give you guys a hint. If you write down, it depends on the players behind me, that's not an answer. That's like saying, okay, champ, what's your plan for this contender? I'm your trainer and I'm talking to you. I want to hear your game plan before you go against the #1 contender. And you go, well, you know, it depends on him. What specifically does it depend on, champ? What are we going to be reacting to? Oh, well, you know, it depends on him. Okay, let's start with this slide. All of these answers are wrong. Every single one of them, in my mind. Secondly, most of you are BSing me. No one, and I mean no one, has watched as much tournament poker as I have. Everybody opens there 100% of the time or 0% of the time. They almost never adjust. It's literally 1 person out of 10 who will fold or raise there on different occasions. Now, if you said 40% because of GTO principles or whatever percentage you pick, sure, okay, that's great. If you're playing cash above 500 NL or a high stakes tournament, but 99% of you are not playing those games. You're in low stakes cash games or smaller to mid stakes tournaments or big open field tournaments with serious buy-ins but not great players, and you're playing a blanket style if you just say like 40% of the time. I would love it if we could use the same approach every day we play poker, but it's not that simple. So GTO is very powerful if you're sitting down with very good players and you don't want to give up anything before you find something you can exploit. That's where GTO, I think, is very important. That happens a lot on the .com sites, especially at the higher stakes tournaments. I think it's extremely valuable for that. But if you guys are playing against average players, guys you know that are exploitable, and often are exploitable in the same ways, very predictable patterns that pretty much every player falls into, I think it's a little bit better to start with a style geared to exploit the other player. Starting hand charts are garbage. But I mean, seriously, I want to ask you guys a question. How many different starting hand charts have you looked at? Have any of them really ever done anything for you? Isn't it strange when you buy a pro's package of materials and they have a starting hand chart, then you see them on TV not using it? Why is it they do that? So, I used to have students who've been playing for 5 years. They'd say, would you give me a starting hand chart? And I used to say, if you don't have one memorized by now, you're not going to do it. And the reason for that is we all subconsciously know starting hand charts fall short. I've made them before because they're nice to start from, but there's issues with them. Starting hand charts are a helpful starting point, don't get me wrong, but I hate making them. I give my students a very compact strategy that will get them deeper in tournaments, but I hate making starting hand charts because you come to hands like this. This hand does turn a profit for me, but would you recommend it for a starting player or even an intermediate player? Of course not. That'd be dangerous. But then if I don't put this in your starting hand charts, I'm depriving you of an edge, and I don't want to do that either. Let's go back to this slide. If you haven't written anything down, I'd really recommend that you do so right now. I want you to look at the quality of your answer. How comfortable do you feel staking your tournament future on it? If you're uncomfortable with the quality of your answer, I have some bad news for you. You're staking your tournament future already on that answer. If this is a significant portion of your life trying to be good at poker and you did not like the quality of this answer, I think if we spend 15 minutes focusing on the quality of this answer, it would greatly improve the rest of your life focused on poker. Why do you open or not open there? You open here if it's unlikely you're going to get 3-bet. That's it. If I'm playing a $530 tournament in Vegas or a $50 tournament online, I will open there almost every single time. If I'm playing a World Poker Tour event, I will have to eyeball cutoff and button. If they're young guys who want to fight, I won't bother. If they look a little older and complacent, I'm going to get in there. If Michael Mizrachi or Antonio Svendiari or one of these really good Scandi pros is on the button and I'm not planning to 4-bet, I might not open ace-jack offsuit there. I'm going to be focusing on 3-betting in those games because that will freeze out better players behind me. They will be far less likely to play when they have to cold 4-bet to get in the pot or cold call a 3-bet. Guys, just trying to keep things moving along. I'm just going to go to the next slide, but if there's any slide, I'd repeat what I said. If someone had taught me what I just said on this slide, I would be owning islands in Fiji right now. The open is everything. It's like your jab in boxing. Once you have it down, you almost don't need anything else if you throw it right. This is what happens when nobody 3-bets you. This is a database of mine detailing every open I've done where no one 3-bet me. This is exactly what we're aiming for. As you can see, there's not a single unprofitable column, even when we get down to the 10-5 offsuits in the other non-suited hands department. You look to see if someone's going to 3-bet or you do not open at all. If you're in a game where people don't typically 3-bet, you could manufacture this on every hand nobody 3-bets. It's hard to understate how many raises 39,000 is. For reference, a WSOP schedule played from start to finish is about 5,000 hands. Of those 5,000 hands, maybe 15% will be raises. That means 750 of those hands would be raises. So 39,000 raises would be 52 years at the WSOP, playing every no limit hold'em event. And by the way, guys, this is not special. This isn't because I'm some kind of special player. Every database I look at with these conditions looks like this from a winning player. And I look at new databases every single day when I'm coaching. Let me show you how you get numbers like this. What is your goal in no limit hold'em? Most of you guys have the same goal when you play, which is how can I play perfect? It's not stated, but that's what you're thinking. Everyone is too hard on themselves. When the other players criticize you, many of you feel as if that means you play terrible. Yet 95% of the people in any rigged game are losing players. That means if you're being criticized, it's a good thing because then you have effectively lost the approval of losers. My goal when I play no limit hold'em is to make money. I don't care how bad I look while I'm doing this. I'm not here for the approval of some asshole in a hoodie and a fitted cap who is pissed his parents once made him get a summer job. My goal pre-flop and no limit hold'em is to make you put money in the middle of the pot with too many hands so I can steal it later. If you guys are taking notes, I'd write that down and I'd think about that through the day. Because I'm not going to make a fortune stealing the blinds and no one will let me do that anymore or let you do that. So what I want to do and what you should do is we want to get heads up because then it's easier to bluff. And I want that one person we get heads up with to put a ton of money in the middle with a bunch of weak hands so I can steal that money later. So you can steal that money later. How do you get numbers like that? Well, every winning player can get numbers like that. But the way you do it is, well, who is the most likely person to play against you if you raise? It's always the big blind, right? Well, that's a good thing. Especially, you should actually take steps to get heads up with the big blind. If you raise to 3.1x, you're more likely to get to the big blind. Because people have a huge bias against raises above 3x because they're so abnormal over the last 10 years in poker. I had one student raise to 3x for a month and then 3.1x for another month. 3 bets against him went down 25%. I've run that experiment again and again. It does seem to be decreasing in efficiency, efficacy, whichever word you want to pick, for America's card room because a lot of people do try that there, but pretty much everywhere else it's fine. It seems to just get you to the big blind a lot, and the most likely person to call you is, especially if you use bigger raises, is always the big blind. And if the big blind is the person calling you all the time, then that's where you'll make money with almost any two cards. That's a really good thing. The reason for this is fairly basic, guys. If you look at any database on Earth, you'll usually see this. You'll notice in this section I highlighted that the average fold to c-bet is 48.7%. What's interesting about that is that if you look at the standard big blind calling range, you'll notice it has a pair or a draw 52.5% of the time, which means they're folding when they have high cards or nothing 47.5% of the time. So what's left if this is just an average big blind calling range? Flopzilla under statistics is telling me how often each of these hands will flop. So I put a filter, I click on it, and it gives me this little red filter next to each portion of the range I want to put together in a bigger range. So I just marked every pair, I just marked every flush draw, every open-ended straight draw, and you'll notice that comes 52.5% of the time, which means that 47.5% of the time the person is missing. That is awfully close to the fold to flop c-bet we see on pretty much any database. Or not any database, but most databases you look at will look like this. That's largely how you get these numbers. You get a guy to put in a substantial amount out of position. My favorite is more than 3x. They usually don't adjust their range. Most people, if they're going to call with 35% of the hands out of the big blind, they're going to do that whether it's 3.5x or 3x, come hell or high water, because it's really in vogue to call out a position now. Especially in big blind ante tournaments, people don't understand that the ante is not reducing your investment. It's not helping your pot odds. So many people feel like the big blind ante makes it a double big blind, so you can make it 4x, and many people will call it jack deuce offsuit. So you get a guy to put in 3.5x out of position with 35% of hands or more, then he misses and you take his money. That's pretty good for us. It's not brain surgery. If he's going to call you with a third of his hands, like everybody and their mother does these days from the big blind, then he's going to miss most flops and you'll take his money. Those 8 big blind pots you pick up when he misses are not chump change either. Aces on average makes about 9 or 10 big blinds. And you're getting that with very little variance here. If multiple people call you too when you use these bigger raises, that's not a big deal either, because then you get great odds on your hand. You won't be making as much money as when you're bluffing just one person out of position, but even though you can't bluff because 2 other people will only both miss the flop about a third of the time, you win a bigger pot when you do hit the flop. So that does help you a little bit. The big problem is when people 3-bet you. If you filter for hands where you face a 3-bet, you're going to see most databases look like this. I protected this guy's identity, but I really didn't need to. The average guy loses when he's 3-bet, especially when he's out of position, because it's like being back in the big blind. Nobody makes money from the big blind for a reason. It's a forced bet out of position. You're going to miss most of the time, and you have a real lack of options for bluffing because the other person gets to see what you're doing, and it's really hard to construct a believable bluff. But if someone 3-bets you in position, they more or less synthesize that same situation. They have forced a bet on you out of position, much like you were in the big blind. Guys, this is all pretty low-hanging fruit. I just don't know why we don't discuss it more. When I'm teaching my students and I show them, hey, you know, when you get 3-bet, it's really hard for you to make money, most of them go, well, I know the games where I'm not really likely to get 3-bet, and then we can make you open more there. And then there's other games, like I was discussing when I was in WPT Prague. I was lucky enough to barely make the final table in Prague. I couldn't open ace-10 offsuit from the hijack because it was 50-60% of the time I was going to get 3-bet in the cutoff in the button. And if I didn't have a plan to 4-bet bluff, which fortunately I did get to 4-bet at one point, but if I didn't have a plan to 3-bet any of the 4 guys behind me and I was going to get 3-bet a significant percentage of the time, I would have just been giving 2.5x, 3x to my opponents every time I opened there. Because I was looking for that, I was able to, even though I was playing against really talented competition, I was able to squeeze into that final table because I wasn't just giving away 3 big blinds, 2 big blinds, 3 big blinds. But I see many Americans go over there and they just think they're going to whip the table. And they open with 6-4 suited and stuff like that. So they just keep giving away that money, and then eventually they have to win a flip because they're just consistently put in that spot, or they call out a position and hope for the best. If we can avoid this, you make more final tables than you deserve to, both when you put pressure on weaker tables and when you know that discretion is the better part of value at slightly more aggressive tables. For this reason, the first of the 5 pre-flop plays you need to succeed is open more when it's unlikely anyone will 3-bet you. So when you're in middle position, low jack, hijack, and you see the guys behind you not paying attention, or you see their 3-bet percentages are 6% or below, start pressing more. Don't be afraid to look stupid. If you're playing live, a good tip is to take a second. Zachary Elwood talks about this, and I find it to be pretty true. If someone makes any movement while you're pondering opening or not, then he probably has nothing. People with aces and kings try to not draw attention to themselves in hopes you'll think, ooh, the coast is clear, then you'll open. If a guy makes a big show out of waiting for you, looks impatient, or is on his phone, or is watching TV, he generally doesn't have the hand. Press more. And in the United States and Canada, it's really nice. People will look at their hand ahead of time a lot of the time, so look for that. All right, guys, this video has been brought to you by Master the Flop. Guys, this is the video series I did that started it all. I'm still blown away by the results my students got after they watched this video pack. Without getting into too many details about my life when this video series was made, the long and the short of it is this. In the midst of a health scare, I was trying to recount like every post-flop trick I used to get folds and insane value out of marginal hands while always keeping the ball in my court. And these files were the result. I never thought they would be as popular as they were with my students and with people who bought these videos. In this series, you're going to learn how to play the most common trouble boards, get more value, check back correctly, and always stay in control. I show all my work. It's all combinatorics. You can see all the ranges. And just ask yourself, is that how people play? And if the answer is yes, the overwhelming majority of the time, that is how they play, then this will show you the exploitable plays that will help you get folds when you need them. I have a system that I teach that's very much about chopping out pots pre-flop and chopping out pots on the flop. And to go beyond that, you need master the flop. You've heard me discuss that in other videos here, which was, keep the betting lead, those kind of concepts, PBSH, position bigger pots, superior hands, heads up. This is expanding past all of this. This is, how should you be thinking during the hands? When should you check back a flop? When should you buy the showdown? How do you bluff people on high card boards? How do you bluff people on suited boards, wheeled boards, paired boards, when straight draws come out, flush draw boards, when all the board is small cards, and more.
And that wraps up this part of the training series. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned a lot from it. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up to let me know how I'm doing. And if you learned something from this video, please let me know in the comments what your key takeaway or your biggest aha moment from watching this video was. I promise you, if you do that and then look at the other comments that are there, you're going to learn a whole lot more. This is the beauty of YouTube. This is the beauty of community. This is how we grow as a team, by sharing our insights, reading what others' insights were, and engaging in discussion to further develop those thought processes. I really hope you're enjoying this learning series. And when you're ready to watch more training lessons like this one, feel free to check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Gripst, or come by my website, www.gripst.com, and join Team Gripst for exclusive discounts, offers, and training opportunities. We got a whole lot of good ones coming on the way, and I hope that you are someone I will be getting to share them with. Let's get stacking. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found it educational and entertaining. If you want to join Team Gripst, click on that subscribe button and tap that bell to be notified every time a new video goes live. For behind the scenes updates and motivational quotes from my poker journey, follow me on Instagram. And when you're ready to take one step closer to becoming poker's next champion, click on me in 3, 2, 1, and let's get stacking.